Hello folks and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to try to put together my ultimate festival lineup. And I think that this is somewhat of a dilemma for us metal fans, because we always look at different festival lineups and we compare them and we dream about what bands are going to play at that festival that we're going to visit the next summer. So I thought what bands I would pick if I was responsible for putting a metal festival together. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. So make sure to smash that like button and subscribe if you aren't already subbed up. But before we do this, we need to establish some rules. Otherwise I would just book 500 different metal bands to my festival and see them all at once. So I'm thinking a 3-day festival where we book 3 headliners. And the headliners must be bands that draw the big crowds, bands like AC/DC, Kiss, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and bands of that status and magnitude. And then we're going to pick 6 big bands that are popular, but are perhaps not playing in the same division as the headliners in terms of their popularity. And then I'm thinking 12 mid-sized bands and 16 underground bands, so that we get a good mix of some famous acts and some bands that only put out an album or 2. So there's going to be a lot of tough choices here, and some bands that I really want to see aren't going to make it due to these limitations. And since this is my fantasy festival, I've also decided to include what year I want to see these bands, because there will be different set lists and band members and such, so I think that the year would also be very important here, because there is of course a huge difference to see Metallica play live in 1986 compared to 2016, for example. So, let's check out the lineup for the Ruthless Metal Festival then. And I think we should start with the 3 headliners. And I choose Metallica to be my first headliner, because they were the band that got me interested in metal music back in the day. And as I mentioned earlier, it wouldn't be as exciting to see them today. No, I would definitely go back to the 80s. And I'm thinking 1985 would perhaps be a great year to see them. Then they would only be playing songs from their first 2 records, and perhaps 1 or 2 new songs from Master of Puppets. And Cliff Burton would be alive and handling the bass, of course. So I think that 1985 would be the perfect time to catch them live. Sure, 1986 would be cool too, but I prefer Ride the Lightning to Master of Puppets. So I rather hear more songs from their first 2 albums. So that's why I've chosen Metallica as my first headliner. My second headliner is going to be Judas Priest. And I would like to see the 1979 version of the band, because I just love 70s Priest. And by 1979 they had released a bunch of great albums. And they had also switched from the hippie look to the leather and studs look the year before, which I do prefer. And their drummer Les Binks would still be in the band. And it was also the year when they released Unleashed in the East, which is generally seen as one of the absolute best live albums of all time. So 1979 would be an amazing time to catch Priest live. And our third and final headliner is going to be Black Sabbath. And I've decided to go with Black Sabbath from 1981, when Ronnie James Dio was still fronting the band. And I'm thinking that they would play a lot of songs from both Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. It's my absolute favorite era of Black Sabbath, even if I hold Heaven and Hell slightly higher than Mob Rules. I still think that it would be better with more material for them to choose from. So 1981's Black Sabbath is my third and final headliner. So let's check out the second tier then. And we're going to pick 6 big and well-respected bands now. Bands that will draw some crowds, but your grandma might not be as familiar with all of these. So first out is Mercyful Fate, and I would like to see them in their prime, before they broke up. So I'm thinking Mercyful Fate back in 1984 when Don't Break the Oath was new. That would have been awesome. And they would play songs from the EP, Melissa and Don't Break the Oath. And you just can't beat that. So I'm thinking that we need King Diamond on this festival as well. And I would choose 1990 for King Diamond, when the Eye was new. And they would have released 5 albums by then. All masterpieces in my opinion, so we can't go wrong with both Mercyful Fate and King Diamond at this festival. And then I would love to invite Slayer, and my favorite era of the band is the Metal Blade years. And I would be happy to just hear songs from Show No Mercy and the Haunting the Chapel EP. And they also released the Live Undead album back in 1984, so I'm going with 1984 pre-Rain in Blood era of Slayer. And the next band on our bill is Queensryche, and I'm going for early Queensryche here, pre-Rage of Order and Operation Mindcrime. Why, you might wonder? Well, just watch that Queensryche Live in Tokyo video from 1984. It's on YouTube, and then you'll understand, because Jeff Teet's performance during that gig is probably the most impressive singing that I've ever heard in my whole life. So this was a no-brainer for me. And only hearing songs from the EP and the Warning would be perfect, even if you miss out on a few classic Queensryche songs. Next up is the doom metal legends Candlemass, and I would go with the year 1989, because Tales of Creation was released that year, and it's a marvelous record. Plus it's their fourth studio album, so they had a lot of great songs to choose from. And it's also the classic lineup of Candlemass with Messiah Marcolin. And I think it would be a great mix to invite some doom metal bands to our festival, because we can't just have classic heavy metal and thrash metal bands performing. And our sixth and last big metal band is going to be Exodus, because I think that Bounded by Blood is probably the greatest thrash metal album of all time, more or less. So I would love to hear Exodus perform it with Paul Baloff, of course. So we're going with Exodus from 1985, and we don't really need any songs from the late 80s and beyond, because almost every good song that Exodus wrote are on Bounded by Blood. And now it's time for our 12 mid-sized bands, and these are bands that had an underground following, but perhaps never fully broke into the mainstream. So I'm choosing Angel Witch here from 1980, because their debut album is one of my favorites, and I would love to hear it being performed back then with the lineup that recorded the album. And next up is Diamond Head, another new wave of British heavy metal band. And it was one of the first new wave of British heavy metal bands that I've heard outside Iron Maiden. So they were an early favorite of mine, so obviously we need them. And just like Angel Witch, I just want to hear them perform their debut album, Lightning to the Nations. So we're going with 1980 for Diamond Head. Next up is Agent Steel, a brilliant band that mixes speed, power and thrash. And I just love the high-pitched singing by John Cyrus. And I would love to see them back in 1987, when Unstoppable Force was still new. And then we need Exciter, the world's premier speed metal band. And I would go with the 1984 version, when the founding trio Dan Beeler, John Rick and Alan Johnson were still intact. And we also need Forbidden in our lineup, because they were an amazing live band, just so intense. And 1990 seems like a great year when Twisted Into Form was fresh out of the gate. And next up is Cirith Ungol, and they were one of the most unique bands back in the day, and I just love them. King of the Dead is one of my favorite records, so I would go with 1984. We also need thrash metal legends Vio-Lence in the lineup, because they were one of my favorite thrash bands, and a superb live act from what I've seen, so 1990 for Vio-Lence. And I also want to see Manila Road in the lineup, and it wasn't easy to pick a year for them, but I'm going with 1986 when the Deluge was still new. And we also need some muscle rock, so I'm inviting Canada's own Thor. And I want to hear him perform songs from Only the Strong, so we're going with 1985. And let's invite doom metal legends Pentagram too. And since I love Day of Reckoning, we're going with 1987 for Pentagram. And next up is Swiss thrash metal band Coroner, and they are perhaps the greatest band to ever play thrash, at least when it comes to their technical skills. And I would go with 1990's version of Coroner, because there was a video called Thrashing East where Coroner played with the creators Sabbath and Tankard, and they just crushed it there, and that video was released in 1990, so that's what we're going with here. And our last mid-sized band is going to be Grim Reaper, one of the best new wave British heavy metal bands, with some great singing from Steve Grimmett. And we're going with 1985 for Grim Reaper, back when Fear No Evil was new. And that's the mid-sized bands. And now we're going to pick 16 underground bands to fill up our festival lineup. And these are the chosen ones. We're starting with a Swedish duo here, Heavy Load from 1983 and Gotham City from 1984. Two of the greatest bands to ever do it, but somehow they are still relatively unknown. And I would also go with Pagan Altar, and I'm choosing 2006, since I absolutely love Mythical and Magical. Pagan Altar was simply an extraordinary doom metal band that you need to listen to if you haven't already. And since I think that Possessed by Fire is one of the best thrash debuts of all time, we're inviting Exhumer, and I'm going with 1986 for them. And let's add Satan to our lineup, the new wave British heavy metal band. And I would love to hear them perform Caught in the Act, so 1983 it is. And I'm a fan of Queensryche, a Swedish heavy metal band. And I would like to hear them play songs from Visions of the Past, so I'm going with 1984. Our next band is a French heavy metal band by the name of Sortilege, and 1984 would surely be a great time to catch them live. And since we skipped Venom amongst the bigger bands, I still think that we can get the essence of Venom by inviting Venom Inc. So I'm thinking 2017, but I would of course want them to play some older songs as well. And next up is Us from Finland, a very underrated band. And I would love to see these guys after the release of the Turn the Cross Upside Down EP. Next up is Mercy, and they were a heavy / doom metal band from Sweden. And they were fronted by Messiah Marcolin before he joined Candlemass. And in my opinion they were one of the best bands from Sweden, so we're going with 1985, because I want to hear them perform the Witchburner album. And next up is the German thrashers Death Row, because Deception Ignored is one of my favorite thrash metal albums, and it came out in 1989, and it's a prog thrash masterpiece. So I want to hear them play songs from that one, but also earlier songs would be cool to hear. And I also want to see Tyrant, the British Tyrant, or the Hold Back the Lightning Tyrant. And they just released one single and some demos, but they were absolutely brilliant. So I want to hear them from 1984. And let's invite US metal legends Medieval Steel, and I'm going with the year 1984. I also would like to invite Clovenhoof to my festival, a classic new wave British heavy metal band, but I would like to see them play live in 1989 when the Sultan's Ransom was still new. Next up is Solitude Aeternus, and I'm going with 1992 here, because I love their early work. Brilliant epic doom metal with some amazing vocals from future Candlemass vocalist Robert Lowe. And our very last band here is the new wave of British heavy metal doomsters Witchfinder General. And this is a band that I've listened to forever, and I never really got tired of them. So I'm going with 1983 here, so that I can hear songs from both of their studio albums, Death Penalty and Friends of Hell. And that's all the bands that I would invite to play the Ruthless Metal Festival. So let's check out the full poster then. And I think that this would be the ultimate metal festival lineup if I get to choose. Sure, there are a lot of great bands missing here, and I've seen a couple of bands like Megadeth, Celtic Frost, Overkill, Saxon, Metal Church and so on. So even if I love them, I decided to go with other bands. I mean, I've seen a couple of bands on this list too, but since I'm not completely ancient, I haven't seen some of them back in their prime. I saw Judas Priest on the Angel of Retribution tour, for example, but it would of course be something else to have seen them back in 1979. And now I'm wondering if you would like to visit the Ruthless Metal Festival, and how much would you pay for a ticket? Let me know. And if you wouldn't like to go, then why not? Let me hear your thoughts. And let me know what your ultimate festival lineup would be. And feel free to use the same rules as I. 3 headliners, 6 big bands, 12 mid-sized ones and 16 underground bands. Or let me know what your absolute favorite dream concert would be and what year it would take place. And if you found this video interesting, then don't forget to destroy that like button and subscribe with the bell notifications turned on. And if you enjoy my videos, please consider donating a few dollars, because it takes forever to edit these videos and it's just not possible without your support. And here are my Patreon supporters, aka the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Or you can always show some support if you buy a t-shirt through my merch store, which is linked down below. And I'm also on Facebook, Discord and Spotify, so check those out as well. And that's all for now, so thanks for watching and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.